Tandem Nomads, episode 255. In time like these of global crisis and war, you might be feeling a little anxious or feeling guilty to even think of launching your new business or promoting your business. So in this episode, I want to help you address this big hurdle that I know so many of you struggle with right now. Hello, Nomad Nation. Welcome to Tandem Nomads, the podcast show and entrepreneurship platform where you can find great inspiration and tips to grow a successful portable business and thrive in your global nomadic life. This is your host, Emer Deregi. I'm a business and marketing coach and the founder of Tandem Nomads. In today's episode, I want to talk about the context and the environment in which you are doing business. So at the time that I'm doing this recording, the world is being shaken by the war and the attack of Russia on the territory of Ukraine and the millions of people who have to flee their country right now to seek for refuge. So I want to start, first of all, this episode by sharing my thoughts for those who are in that situation and actually be it in Ukraine, but also worldwide. There's a lot of people across the world right now who are going through such a hard time. And I can understand how difficult it can be to keep showing up when we know that there are so many people out there suffering right now and running for their own life. And I wanted to really do this episode with you today because I know, and I've been talking to so many of my clients and so many of you who've been listening to the podcast, who've been reaching out, who've been telling me how hard it is for you to know what to do now with your business and feeling guilty of continuing your business, or sometimes even feeling guilty of being happy and continuing your life. I had some of you telling me how you even wonder if you can even celebrate your birthday or your business anniversary or keep on with your big launch that you've been dreaming of for so long and you've been planning for so long. And you're asking yourself, is this the right time to do that? Can you seriously keep doing your business despite of what's happening in the world? So I want to address this for you today. Hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll feel more empowered and encouraged in your journey and how to show up in times like these. But here is my shortcut and simple answer. Of course, in times like these, you cannot do business as usual. However, you cannot stop doing business. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you how you can show up in your business and as an individual in times of crisis, but doing it mindfully so that you can still feel empowered to continue your business, but do it in a way that feels right for you, first of all, but also for your audience. But the biggest thing I want to share with you, and this is more personal before I go into sharing more practical tips as I love to do, I want to say something that might feel borderline here, but I feel like I can do that based on my own experience living in situations of crisis and war. As a child, I have lived in times where for many years of my life, I would wake up wondering if something will happen to us or my parents. I lived in times where we had to actually sleep in the corridor on the floor, because that was the only place where there was no bullets that could cross the building and reach us, and things like that. So I don't want to go into details of that, but I feel like for the first time, I need to share that part of my history to understand where I come from. If by any chance what I'm going to say here does not feel right to you, I want you to know that I'm sharing that from my perspective and my experience. So when the war in Ukraine started, like everybody, I was so shocked by what happened and hurt. But I was also disturbed to see how many people were frozen in their day-to-day life and just stopped doing their businesses and stopped showing up and just felt like they wanted to crawl in a bowl and freeze. And it really reminded me a little bit of what happened with the pandemic. And this is why actually in this show notes of this episode, I'm going to share with you a lot of episodes and articles that I have written when the pandemic had started, because the behavior is the same. The context is so much different, but the natural behavior of solo entrepreneurs is the same one, as well as individuals. We're human, and it's normal to feel that empathy and wonder what to do. But here is what I want to share with you before I go about how to show up mindfully in your business. And I'm trying to find a way to say this in the most mindful way, but I need you to know that this thing that you're experiencing with Ukraine that's horrible is the day-to-day life for many people across the world. And you stopping your business and stopping your life is not doing any good for the Ukrainian people and the rest of the world who is going through turmoil right now. By stopping doing your business, by stopping showing up and freezing, not knowing what to do because you feel guilty, you feel also anxious about the world, which I totally understand, by the way. But that's not going to help. If anything, it actually is counterproductive and harmful. The more of us who stop doing business, but also stop consuming and stop living our lives, we are contributing to making this environment even worse than what it is. So I want to start by saying that it is your responsibility to keep doing business. You don't do business as usual. I'm going to share with you how you're going to do it more mindfully, but it is your responsibility to show up. And I'm really insisting on this one, and I'm feeling very much passionate about this. I almost want to cry right now. You need to show up, because if you don't show up, you are making evil win. And it's not fair to those who can't show up because they need to run for their lives. So if you care, if you feel hurt, if you feel that empathy and even that anxiousness and fear sometimes, I want you to turn it into action for yourself first, and then for your community, and then for the world, to make it a better place. So I really want you to understand that it's not business as usual, but business must continue. And most importantly, life must continue regardless of the threats and regardless of the situation right now. Now, let's look at how you can show up mindfully to first of all, be sensitive to the conditions that other people don't have, that you have, but also to show up in a way that can help. I'm sure that a lot of you want to help. So now that I shared with you my message here, know that what you're experiencing today, this fear of having war by your doorsteps, is something that a lot of people across the world live across Asia, South America, Africa, Middle East. This is the day-to-day life of a lot of people across the world since decades. And now it's reaching Europe and the Western world, where this is something new. Europe has been in peace for so many years, so I understand the shock it is to have to see this so close from home and with people who are similar to us, and we can't understand how this can happen to us. Unfortunately, today we have that reality check that it can happen to us too. But I want you to learn from those people who have experienced this before, and the resilience they've been building to be able to keep on with their lives and their businesses and their work and the impact they want to make in the world. All right. So share that word that I really wanted to insist on. And I'm going to share with you just simple ways that you can show up. And then I'm also going to give you an example of how I did it and how other people are doing it to show up in a mindful way in their businesses. But the first step that I want you to take if you are feeling anxious is to take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. And I'm going to start by addressing those of you who might have been triggered by what happened here, who have been maybe triggered because you have experienced some trauma in your own life. So if you are in that situation, I want to urge you to get the help you need to process that trauma, because I can understand how much panic and anxiety can be triggered by that. And I was really close to get there. Actually, the Ukraine war has triggered for me a lot of things. And it was really hard. But thankfully, because I've experienced that, I know that it doesn't matter how bad things are. Human nature is amazing. And the resilience we can develop is just unbelievable. So I want you to trust in the fact that no matter how bad things are, you will always find a way around it if you want to fight. I remember that when I was a kid, humor was our weapon to actually fight through the day-to-day life of having people dying every single day in our own streets. So this is really important to realize that living and being happy and building resilience should not be a source of guilt, but actually a source of defiance, a way to fight against evil. But before you can do that, if you have been experiencing any trauma, it's important to talk about it. It's important to get the help you need. So just wanted to really insist on that first. But if you haven't been going through trauma in your life, but are still experiencing anxiety and all of that, I also want you to get the help you need. Because if it's really affecting you physically and mentally, the first step before you try to even do something about this is to get the help you need. Because you are useless for anyone if you don't make sure to put your self-care first. This is really important. So first of all, if you're finding yourself guilty or feeling anxiety or in doubt or not, or even just demotivated to do business, I want you to sit down and take a breath. And when I say take a breath, I mean it literally. But I also mean it in so many different ways of mindfulness, like take a walk, go meditate, do things that make you feel good. For some people, it's cooking. For other people, it's drawing. Anything that helps you just get back into yourself and feel a little more grounded. Because if you're not grounded, you can't take decisions and have clarity on how to show up. So take that first step, take a deep breath, and if you need help, reach out for help. Once you've taken that deep breath, the next step I want you to do is to listen. So here, this one is very tricky. This one is really tricky because it is about making sure to find that balance between not getting overwhelmed, especially in crises like these, by all the noise around you. And at the same time, make sure to be mindful of what's happening around you. So that one was a difficult one for me, to be honest with you. I had to take a deep breath, and then I sat down and for over a week had to have so many conversations with many of you who are listening, as well as my clients, to understand what's happening. So when I say listen, I'm talking here on a perspective as an entrepreneur. I want you to tune into your audience, your clients, your community, and understand how they are doing and how are they processing. And spend more time asking questions and trying to come up with answers. This is the best way for you to know how to show up, is to understand where your audience is coming from. So I had to do that because I realized that my experience, my personal experience, is very different from my audience. It turns out that, my upbringing was very different. I don't come from the West. I had a very different experience. And my way of reacting to what happened in Ukraine was very different from my audience. And I had to work hard on listening instead of trying to make people understand my perception of things. And by doing that, it really helped me do my best to show up in the right way. And I'll show you an example of how I did that. But I want you to take the time to ask yourself, in your business first, your type of clients, how are they reacting to what's happening, so that you'll know later what to do about it. Which leads me to the third step. Once you've listened and had conversations to understand where people are at right now, then ask yourself, what can I do about this? What actions can I take to support? First of all, support your community, support your audience, like I'm doing it here with you for this episode, but also support the causes that you care about, no matter which crisis we're talking about. I'm hoping we won't need this episode again for any other crisis, but there were many crises along the year, and Ukraine is one of those many. Unfortunately, this one is a big one and very scary one. But I do believe that this process is the same. You first start with yourself, you listen, and then you ask yourself, how can you take action? So the areas where you want to take action is, first of all, your client base. How can you support your client base and serve them? And I have a bunch of episodes about that I'm going to put in the show notes of this episode. So how do you serve them? But also, on top, once you ask yourself that, how can you support your client base? Then ask yourself, if you care about this crisis and want to do something about it, what can you do about it, either as an individual or as a business? So I'm going to give you now some examples in my case. So I was triggered and I had to take a deep breath. I had to meditate and pray, because I need to go deep in myself to find the courage to also talk to some friends about things that I already talk about, so that I could have some help to process what I was going through. And once I did that, then I was more armed. To be honest with you, I did not do it in that step. I kind of did these two at the same time, but it can be hard to do at the same time. But then I spent a lot of time with my clients and with my audience, listening, and through social media, through my newsletters, and realize how many of you are really frozen in doing business right now. So I realized that's the first step where I need to help. And I realized I could not help only with marketing tips. I needed help to process. So I don't know if you've been following me on Instagram and in my newsletter, I had reached out to my great peer, Sunday Bean. She's my friend and partner, and she's been experiencing the same thing. And we were talking about, let's do something about this. And then we decided to come up and create a virtual meetup, and that we shared to invite you to come and help you process what was going on in terms of emotions, not just business. I knew that alone I wouldn't be able to do that, because it would be hard for me to have the tools to guide you through first processing your own emotions. And this is why I'm like, I could not think of a better person than Sunday Bean to help me with that. So we did that. And on top of it, we invited two of our great peers to bring their expertise as well to help process. For instance, have, first of all, process in terms of news, how to analyze the news and make sure to not get trapped into all those fake news, but also not just fake news, but the overwhelm of news. So we had my great team members, Sarah Black, who works in the Tandem Nomads team, and we invited her to come and share her expertise on that. And my great friend, Kath Brew, who's also an amazing person in so many ways. She has so many talents, and one of them is related to meditation and shamanic and ancient beliefs around energies in the universe. And she helped us process this call with two beautiful meditations and prayers for the Ukrainian people as well. So that was really grounding and helpful to just feel a little more calm through this process. And this was my answer of, how can I help my audience? That was the first thing I did. And the second one was this episode on top of the one-on-one conversations that I had with some of you. So ask yourself, what can you do for your audience? And this was an example for here. And then, and one of the things that I want to share with you, we asked ourselves in this call is, okay, now that we process how we're doing, what can we do to support Ukraine in this case, for instance? So what we've done is that we crowdsourced our resources of information in that call and created a document of all the things we can do to help. For those of you who want to help and wonder how you can help, there's a bunch of resources that I'm going to share with you in the show notes of this episode. So go to tandemnomads.com/255 and you'll find all these resources if you want to take action and wonder what can you do to help directly Ukraine. So in the resources, I'm going to share that document, but I will also share with you previous episodes that I've done about how to show up in crisis. And I give you even more tips about that. So I really want you to listen to them if you really care about how to show up in crisis. But one of the other things that I've seen done is really great is those businesses, like for example, Sarah Black or other friends that I have also thought of instead of just giving their own money directly to an organization, like I have been doing, it's more, okay, here's how I'm going to use my business to support. And some people, for example, give a percentage of their sales to support the refugees. Or I have another friend who had an idea of saying, okay, I'm going to coach my people who deal with emotional stress with Ukraine. And instead of paying me, I want them to pay the organization I support on the ground at the borders to help the refugees. So these are actions you can take on top of the actions that you want to take for your audience, actions that you can take to directly support a cause through your business. And here is another thing that I will refer that to the previous episodes. Then comes, what can you do in terms of your business? How can you pivot your business to make it feel aligned with what you're doing? And for example, if you are launching, then you can ask yourself, should I change a little bit the dates? Or maybe you don't change the dates, but show up differently. One of the things that we discussed, for example, with my teammate Sarah, is how can we adapt the language and adapt the copywriting to make sure that we're not using any words in our marketing that can be misinterpreted because of the context and the environment. So I have more episodes about pivoting and all of that, so I'll share them with you. But once you have gone through this process that then you can think of, okay, what can I adapt in my launch, in my marketing to make sure to be sensitive about what's happening. So you do that proactively in a place of stillness instead of a place of sadness and panic and anxiety. This is really important. You need to feel empowered by the way you show up and also be an example for your audience, your clients, and for those who are doing business. Again, if you stop doing business, you are doing more harm than anything else. So don't stop doing business, but you don't have to do business as usual. You can simply ask yourself, what can I pivot to do it more mindfully so that I can feel good about the way I show up and show up in my full power instead of a place of fear and anxiety. So please check those episodes where I give you a lot of tips about that in the show notes of this episode. But sometimes it doesn't have to do with big pivots. As I said before, you can simply make small adjustments. There was a case during the call where there was a company that was celebrating its 20th anniversary and was asking, can I now celebrate my 20th anniversary when the world is upside down and people are dying? I feel so guilty to even organize a party. And we had discussed it, and it was like, yes, you do continue to celebrate. I was saying how it was important to continue the plan. And if you had the 20th anniversary that you had already pushed because of the pandemic, now there's this, what's next? If we keep living and postponing, we won't be able to keep living. Like I said before, in some places, this is the day-to-day life. So instead of postponing or completely pivoting, it's more about how can you actually continue to celebrate, continue to do your businesses, continue to launch your products or services, but just be a little bit mindful about how you are approaching it. For instance, I loved how this company that was celebrating its 20th anniversary, they did continue their initial plan after this conversation. And what they did is to actually make a piece of that conversation, of that celebration about Ukraine and how they could support Ukraine, but they also celebrated all the other things that they achieved in those 20 years, which was really beautiful. And it was a wonderful way to acknowledge what was happening, but still saying, we have to continue to live. We have to continue to be happy. We cannot stop our lives, even if we feel sad for the Ukrainian people. and also sometimes a bit afraid. There's some things we can do, and one of them is to keep going. And I think this is a really important message. And I absolutely love to see how this company showed up and celebrated in a big way their anniversary, did their event, but they also did it mindfully, but keeping and giving some space to what was happening and not ignoring it. Actually, one of the things that I really insist on is don't ignore what's happening, for sure. You don't have to pivot, but you cannot ignore when something big like this is happening. You want to make sure to acknowledge it, and acknowledge it as quickly as you can so that you can really be relevant with what's happening in the environment. So again, not business as usual, but business continues. So, as I said before, more details if you want more pragmatic descriptions and guidelines on how to pivot. I have a lot of episodes on that. So make sure to go to tandemnomads.com/255. And the list of those resources in the show notes of this episode, you will also find a document with a list of places and things you can do to support Ukraine right now. And I was really grateful to my great friend and partner Sunday Bean and her team. After this call that we had with our community, we gathered all the information that everybody shared into one document, and Sunday created this document that she's gracefully sharing with us as well. So check it out as well in the show notes of this episode, tandemnomads.com/255. If you wonder where are the places where you can contribute to support Ukraine right now. So thank you so much, Nomad Nation. I hope that you won't have to listen to this episode in the future, and that this is helpful as it is now. But as difficult as it is, I really want to invite you to continue to live, continue to be joyful, continue to support, continue to make an impact, and continue to turn your challenges into great opportunities to make an impact and a difference in this world.